a few minutes while we go mark out the grave. Welcome to Excavation Revelation, the channel where excavation strategies are revealed and topics are discussed. My name is Chad. This video is going to reveal the steps in the process of digging a grave. Digging a grave might sound a little bit weird to some people, but it truly is an honor to dig somebody's grave and to be a part of the burial process and to help pay respects in this manner. So we're ready to dig here. We got everything mapped out. This is a 3-foot bucket from the outside of the tooth to the outside of the tooth. So that should be the exact size of the vault. I want to start by stripping the topsoil, just place it off to the side. Then the rest of the spoil dirt, the better stuff, we'll place off to the side. The excess dirt we'll just load out on the truck as we go, so that way we're only handling the dirt once. The hole is essentially 4x8. You want to make sure it's nice and square, straight down, and we're going to go down 4.5 feet deep. That is the depth in Pennsylvania that you dig graves down to. The cemetery caretaker, also known as a sexton, is the one who will actually mark out where the plot is for the grave. They take their time, they measure it and make sure it's squared in the right spot. They usually put stakes in, like in this cemetery, but sometimes they'll have a wooden template they'll just lay down and they'll spray paint it, or they'll leave the template there right in the exact spot. Either way, I like to then use spray paint to mark out the area before I start digging. I like to start by stripping the topsoil and saving it off to the side. You want to put all the spoil at least 2 feet away from the side of the grave. Plywood is a good option to put down first if it's muddy or if you're really concerned about keeping a nice clean finish. The ground in this scenario is pretty frozen, so I'm not too worried about it. But 2 4x8 sheets of plywood work ideal. Like I said, you go 2 feet away from the grave, put one down parallel with the grave, then put the other one just overlapping it slightly. And this will leave the cleanup at a much faster process, make it much easier. But it doesn't always have to be this way. It's a good thing to do, and it's helpful if you want to do that. Start by getting the topsoil out, putting it off to the side. Once you've got the topsoil out, you want to then start digging down to the subsoil. The whole time while you're digging, you want to make sure that you are being very precise, taking your time, getting nice straight edges. You're not under digging, over digging, you're not going outside of your mark. You want to make sure you're keeping this very sharp and very neat. All your spoil is well contained, everything's nice and orderly. So right now here I'm digging the subsoil, so I'm hogging it down a little bit faster. I'm putting it off to the side. This soil is usually pretty decent. It usually doesn't have too many big rocks or anything at this point. Some of it, because you want to keep it one big pile, will go on top of the topsoil, but as long as that topsoil pile is somewhat separated, distinct at the end, it makes it easier to backfill. Once I'm about 2 feet deep is when I usually start casting out the extra dirt, loading it out on a truck. Now this grave was actually really easy. I could keep the truck right on the gravel lane, but the ground is kind of frozen, so I could have backed it in the cemetery if I needed to. At this point is particularly hard when you're in the middle of a cemetery with headstones all around to get the truck into sometimes. Some cemeteries, you could just load it on a little cart if you're dumping it right there on the property. But this cemetery, you have to haul all the dirt out. So it's nice to just load it right in the truck one time and haul it away. By loading it out as you're digging, you're only touching the dirt one time. You're only moving it one time. So it's a little bit more cost effective. One downside of this is you really have to calculate or guess how much dirt you're going to need. You don't want to be shy. You don't have too much. I mean, this will come with a little bit of practice, a little bit of time, but loading it out definitely makes it go a lot quicker if you just do it as you dig. If you have a 1-ton by the time you put the dirt in it, it's going to have a pretty good load on it. So that's also a kind of a way to calculate how much dirt to haul out. If it looks like it's only half loaded in a 1 ton, then you know you didn't put enough on. But again, it just comes with time. You'll get a feel for it, but I like to just load it out as I go. So again, as I'm digging, I'm really taking my time, making sure that the edges are nice and straight, nice and square, that I'm not undercutting it at the end closest to the machine. I'm getting it straight down at the far end. Another thing to keep in mind is if there is already a vault right beside the hole, it will be more likely to cave in. And usually if it's a husband and wife, you want to try to dig right beside that vault to get them side by side. In this case, there's nobody around, so this hole is going to hold its form pretty well. This video is actually for my grandmother, so my brothers are here with me digging this to help honor her and just help make it a little bit easier. So you'll see them being their goofy selves here in a little bit.
I ain't running that thing, I break something. Am I operating your drone?
Sometimes there is a headstone directly in front of you, which really makes it difficult to see what you're doing. It's just something that it's inevitable, you can't really avoid it, you just gotta make the best of it. But this one is just an ideal situation, ideal conditions, and it's really easy to access, really easy to see. But keep in mind, they're not all gonna be this easy if you're thinking about starting to dig graves. As far as placement of the dirt, as far as which side it's on, I try to keep in mind the vault company with their little cart. They're the ones that will carry the vault and set it in. You want to keep them in mind. You want to be able to make sure that they can get in there easily, especially if it's on a hill. You want to make sure that if it's on a steep hill that they have to come up from the upper side, from the lower side, because they'll be casting the vault up above. You don't want them tipping over. So you got to keep them in mind which way is easiest for them to maneuver and get around with the vault. Also, the tent and the procession that's going to go on afterwards, you want to make sure that there's lots of room. So I just felt it was best to put the dirt on the left side. There's a pin over there. Keep the right side nice and open for the tent, for the family, and for easier access. But just something else to keep in mind. I can't really stress enough the importance of keeping this nice and square, your sides straight down. You might be your full dimensions at the top, but by the time you get to the bottom, it might V in a little bit without even realizing it, and that vault is not going to fit in there. You have to have your sides perfectly straight up and down. You have to have your width at the bottom. That's the most crucial part. So sometimes if you're in solid rock or if you have to hammer, you might have to start out a little bit wider at the top and give yourself room to make sure that the bottom is the adequate width. The vault company likes to see at least a couple inches the whole way around, probably about the size of a fist the whole way around. That way they can get their cables on and off nice and easily. If you make it too big, you're going to be kind of fighting it, backfilling. You're going to make it a little bit difficult to tamp it in and compact it. But usually about a fist. It's about all the more you want the whole way around the outside of the vault once it's setting in there. But again, you want to just make sure you're nice and straight and that you're measuring properly to make sure that it fits in there without any issues, because you don't want them to come, it's time for the service, and all of a sudden it doesn't fit. You want to really take your time, measure, make sure it fits. Some cemeteries actually have a little template marked out that's the size of the vault. Vaults are going to vary a little bit depending on the size of the person, but most of them are 34, 36 inches wide, and they're about 90 inches long. But there is the extreme case where they're a little bit bigger, sometimes a little bit smaller, but most of them you can get online, whatever vault company brings it, you can get their dimensions or call them directly and they'll give you a basic guide as far as dimensions they need. But usually, to be safe, the caretakers mark it out a little bit bigger than necessary. just to give a little bit of leeway. But you'll learn the more you dig that the bigger the hole you dig, the more you have to backfill. So you want to keep it tight, but at the same time, you don't want to make it too tight. A big 3-foot bucket like this makes it really nice. It's nice to get the uniform shape, uniform size, but sometimes if it's really rocky, a smaller bucket might be required. Something else to keep in mind if it's in the winter when the ground's frozen, or if it's just really wet and slippery. If you're in a rock or hard material, the machine is going to want to slide on you. You might be digging, all of a sudden you catch a rock and it wants to pull you. So keep that in mind, especially if there's a headstone directly in front of you. It can be very easy to pull yourself and knock a headstone, knock into it, or knock it over. Even when the ground's frozen, it's nice in the winter to get the truck in there, but at the same time, it also makes it harder to dig because the machine just wants to slide around on you. But usually you want to be moving the machine around a little bit just to get the proper angle to make sure your sides are nice and square. I cannot emphasize that enough, how square you want to make your hole.
About 56. Alright.
Sometimes a little bit of handwork is involved with a digging bar or a pick, just to chip out the corners, make sure that they're nice and square. You also want to take your tape measure, verify that the bottom is at the adequate widths and also the adequate length. It's also good to take a shovel, make sure that there are no rocks laying loose in there or sticking up. You don't want any high spots or low spots. You want it as level as possible.
Definitely a little deeper down.
Keep in mind, the vault, it's only a couple inches thick of concrete. And if there's a big rock in the middle, by the time you set that vault down on it, it's going to put pressure on that vault. It could potentially crack or break. Sometimes the vault company will see this, but you want to do your part to make sure it's ready, that they don't have to get down in there and clean up any loose rocks or debris. So it's nice and ready for them. Then just make sure your machine and your trailer are parked out of the way, that they're not going to interfere with any cars or anybody from the funeral procession. You then can haul your dirt to wherever it needs dumped and get rid of it. Now this video, I hope it was helpful. This is just the process that I use to dig graves. Different cemeteries are going to have different requirements, different states are going to have different regulations as far as depth and size. But in Pennsylvania, the area I dig in, this is the way we do it, and it seems to work out quite well. I hope this video was informative and helps, and I hope it also honors my family and my grandma. I love you, Granny.